This is Dr. Goodin with Sociocognitive and Constructivist Views of Learning. Let's focus on constructivist views first. Students actively construct their knowledge from their personal experiences with others and the environment. This is one way of looking at how students learn. And we can look at this individually, as in students do it by themselves. From personal experiences, or we can focus on the others and the environment in terms of social constructivism, or as a whole society learning together, sort of as a unit. With individual constructivism, we call it cognitive constructivism. It's more about our minds and our cognitive abilities. Individuals construct our own understanding of the world. In this case, social interaction is not emphasized. And as teachers or trainers, our role is to provide instructional materials and a supportive environment. Okay. Student interests and choice drive the process. So we want to give, think of a Montessori school. A Montessori school, you may want to look into it if you haven't heard of it, just to see. They have all these options for students to engage in the learning process and to be creative, and so many educational tools that go beyond just the sit in the desk and learn. They're for younger kids, but so many options, really driven by the constructivist viewpoint. Individual constructivism in the classroom. We're going to talk about discovery learning, pure discovery, which is out on their own, alone, and then guided discovery, which means somebody is sort of pointing things out to them and saying, hey, look over here, look at this. And then inquiry-based learning is, asking questions and letting them sort of ask questions. Of course, they need a guide to answer those questions as they sort of picture them exploring, say it's a geology course and you want them to learn about rocks. You might have them go out into a quarry and learn about pick up rocks and learn, and you might guide them and let them ask questions. Social constructivism was really emphasized by Vygotsky, who we mentioned in an earlier section. It emphasizes the role of social context in how we construct knowledge. Learners share individual perspectives with others, and in doing so are able to construct understandings together that would not be possible individually. So we have this idea of distributed cognition, thinking as a unit, as a group, and we commonly do that. We see this a lot, probably advancing even more now that we have things like any social media. Of course, the biggest one I think is probably still Facebook at this point. But are we not, working as a unit in some cases, sometimes as opposing political parties or factions, but we do have this sort of shared cognition and sharing the things we learn with each other and discussing, or normally just arguing if it's social media. But you get the idea. Cognitive tasks in constructivism include clarifying what is going on, organizing the information, elaborating on the information, discovering flaws in reasoning, and entertaining alternative perspectives, looking at the other options and ways of explaining what's going on. So Vygotsky was an originator of the sociocultural theory. He saw teachers as discussion facilitators. Of course, he really wants the power to be with the people, so to speak, with the students, and for them to have discussions, and the teacher is a guide for that process of learning and discussion, not And this is not a teacher behind a podium lecturing. This is a teacher, think of, students in a circle, and the teacher saying, what do you guys think about this? And of course, sharing knowledge and facts, but allowing the students to sort of have some discussion amongst themselves and come to certain conclusions and maybe debate. Different understandings may result from the same instructional materials. And then there's the idea of situated learning, the idea that we can learn through basically a story, an experience, and that our learning can be situated in an environment. So in early situated learning, there were actually stories made about a little boy named Jasper, I believe, who would basically, have adventures, and maybe his adventure would involve traveling to. I think one of them was traveling to save a wounded animal, and figuring out how much time it would take and where the distance, and it was basically a math problem, sometimes a physics problem, something like that. But basically, situating the learning process within a story format. Social constructivism in the classroom involves cooperative learning in groups normally, or at least in dyads or triads, which means twos or threes, elements for successful cooperative tasks. We want positive interdependence. We want you to need to rely on each other. We don't want slackers or social loafers, as we call them. We want individual accountability, which is really hard to get. Group work is often problematic. Of course, it's very difficult when we have an online course such as this. Face-to-face interaction is really important in cooperative tasks. It really allows us to think of all the text messages that you've misread, and even chat messages, and everything that can be misread if you can't see someone's face, or hear their voice, the tone. So face-to-face interaction and group work, and for that matter, is much more difficult when we have an online course, when we lack that face-to-face interaction. Of course, we are improving our capabilities, from Skyping to FaceTiming to having discussion boards. There are possibilities, but I would propose that is still not the same as in person. I would change face-to-face to in person, because I think there's something to be said for being in the same room with someone. And I can't put my finger on it. Won't get into it right now, but it may be something I do some research on in the future. Social skills, are different. In cooperative tasks, we learn them hopefully, and without cooperative tasks, we may have different social skill development. Group processing is interesting. Some would say, the phrase "too many cooks spoil the broth." Of course, groups that are too big do lead to social loafing, do lead to groupthink, which is everybody sort of thinking the same way. But we also need to consider that in groups of 2 to 5, we're likely to get some originality of thought, adding together an additive effect. In other words, my ideas plus your ideas make better overall ideas and better solutions and creative processes. We bring up the idea of tutoring or reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is the students have, we sometimes call this flipping the classroom. Reciprocal teaching attempts to promote comprehension strategies. Well, all right, let's turn it over to you students and see if you can summarize back to me what you've been learning, generating your own questions, clarifying things, predicting what will happen next in the story that you're reading. It it puts a lot more of the onus, a lot more of the locus of control on the student, and asking them to play a larger role. Of course, you see that a lot with all constructivist thought. So an example might be peer-assisted learning strategies. And normally we would pair students up with a student that is slightly more skilled. This goes back to Vygotsky and ideas of the zone of proximal development. If we pair you up with a student that is slightly more advanced than you, you're likely to be thrown into, or sort of encouraged into, working in your zone of proximal development, that area that you could not go to alone and perform at that level alone, but you can if you have a helper, a guide, a mentor, or even just a buddy with a few stronger skills. The stronger reader reads aloud for about 5 minutes. The weaker reader follows. The weaker reader is asked to summarize paragraphs and make predictions. The stronger reader provides scaffolding. That would be an example. So we also think about communities of learners. This is appropriate for older self-regulated students participating in multiple zones of proximal development, suggesting ideas to the community as a whole, taking individual responsibility, sharing the gained expertise with the community members. And we see that going on. Some of you may be familiar, I have the Behavioral Science Club. Many of you education majors may not know about it. You're welcome to join. You don't have to be a behavioral science major or anything like that. But what we do, besides just updating you on the next meeting, we share a lot of information about anything that comes across our Facebook page or news feed or whatever comes into our lives that we find interesting, or even an idea that we create on our own, believe it or not. We might post that and share it in our Facebook group. Athens State University Behavioral Science Club is the name of the Facebook group. And we share this information. I've actually got some other experts from other types of educational psychology, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, some sports psychologists, just various experts in many different fields to add to the conversation and to be there if anybody has questions. So we have created sort of this learning community idea. And when people are self-regulated and self-motivated, they will take this individual responsibility, suggesting ideas, participating, sharing gained expertise with other community members. But it does take that individual responsibility, participating in the rituals and procedures adopted by the community. There's always going to need to be some rules of conduct, some ways of doing things. Here's what we don't post. Here are some guidelines. Here's our mission. Here's what we value with any community in order for it to work consistently and in a stable fashion. Problem-based learning is not bad learning. It's students working in collaborative groups to solve problems, normally complex, ill-defined problems. And they use problem-solving strategies that we've talked about already. The problem is chosen and normally by the instructor. It must be complex, poorly defined. In other words, there's not a very specific, easy answer. We want it to be somewhat difficult, interesting, of course, and requiring the integration of knowledge from more than one domain, so that students are really putting pieces together from different areas of knowledge that they hold. And maybe one student has more expertise in one area while another student can complement them by having expertise in another area. Classroom discussions. We may look at them to initiate, respond, and evaluate. Of course, the role of the teacher during this process is to facilitate the materials and context for discussion, arrange the groups and the seating, monitor the progress of the discussion, and help students evaluate their own outcomes. So again, the teacher as a facilitator. And think of this classroom sort of as one of those small learning communities for a brief period of time. Informal learning experiences may be out of the classroom. They're not pedagogically planned. You may not have a lesson plan, in other words. Student experiences are tied in with the lessons, if possible. Let's take you to the library and let you explore there and look at things. Maybe it is guided to some degree, but it's less pedagogical. Art, science, and natural history museums, zoos, botanical gardens, industrial and agricultural sites, places of ecological interest. Pretty much anything that can add sort of a tangible experience for the students to supplement the course, to add something extra that gets them out, and sometimes to meet with somebody who's actually working in the field. That you're just studying biology, well, let's go talk to a doctor at a hospital and see just where biology, when combined with other subjects and lots of knowledge and training, can get you, and how biology was an integral part to that process. Of course, this goes back to my original ARCS model that I use, establishing satisfaction, ARCS. The satisfaction part is showing people that this particular thing you're doing right now is useful in the real world, outside of this class, beyond this class, in the future, after you've gotten whatever grade you made in this class. This can be useful in your life. Informal learning experiences, successful field trips are well planned and organized, linked with student values and interests, of course, and relevant to the school curriculum, of course. You don't want to just, of course, when you're a student and, you're 13, any school trip is pretty good. But you want it to be tied to a learning process, if at all possible. Diversity in social learning is important. We'll be speaking on diversity more in future sections, very close at hand. Personal and developmental diversity is important to note. Use a variety of real and symbolic models. Note that students are not going to explore in the same ways. They're not going to construct their own learning in the same ways. There may be learned helplessness in special needs students. There may be diversity in the ability of students to self-regulate. And then we have bilingual and ELL students that may need a special type of attention. In summary, sociocognitive views of learning, think about modeling, and the constructivist viewpoint really does point out how the teacher can facilitate and model proper discussion, problem solving, thinking, and exploration. The constructivist view, social constructivism applied to the classroom, and then diversity as being a key issue there. And of course, we will come back to understanding diversity in the classroom with Dr. Goodin very shortly. Thank you very much.